Welcome, welcome, thrice welcome to JWC Livestream. JWC Livestream. This is Sublimated Poesy with David and Ricky. I'm Ricky O, and David, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yes, excellent. So our show Sublimated Poesy gets into all kinds of stuff, but it focuses on poetry, poetic wordplay, or the concept of poetic voice fulfillment. When I first started writing, which was quite a while ago, I thought I fancied myself a poet, and I am, and I was. But over the last 10 years, there's been much involved with evolution, kind of an off and on relationship with poetry. And then I ran into David here, and he reminded me of a lot of things that I forgot, that I misplaced. And it's important to honor the poetic muse, especially resulting from all she gave me. I have a debt of gratitude. You know, all that I learned from poetry as far as how I write and how I view writing. So we're back, poetry and I. I've been writing here and there. Have one that I still haven't gotten to. It's just the nature of the avalanche of busyness. But I'm gonna write that poem. The muse is like burnt like holy letters into stone. So I find it hard to believe. I gotta write it tonight. I gotta stop that. And speaking of writing, David, how have you been, and how's your creativity going?
Yeah, it's progressing steadily. I'm working on a book called Athenaeum, and I am working on poetry and writing essays.
Yeah, are you ever working on Athenaeum? The last couple of chapters have been thrilling. I mean, it's incredible. No regrets in that score. This book's gonna come out great, man. It's gonna come out great. I've been thrilled with that. And your essays are captivating. And poetry, well, you got that down. I have been working. Athenaeum's an ongoing project for me. I mean, I stepped down for a bit because it's going to be a while before I can get back into the narrative. There's other stuff getting done, but I did write a sea shanty. I don't really like it though, but I have to show it to you at some point, David. It's just not. I don't know. I have a few more planned, but I haven't. I got to get to them probably this week, probably Wednesday.
The best way to write one is to listen to one.
Oh yeah, I was, and I'm familiar with a few of them. I got that heritage in me from the old British days. It's in my blood. So somewhere down the line, I'm related to all that. Gets you stirred, wakes you up. A good sea shanty. The nature of the group vocals reminds me of hardcore and punk and stuff. You know, certain kinds of subgenres. Got a lot of energy. Get you moving around. It's very interesting how words and music do that sort of thing in the proper sense. When there's a good tempo and you got some rousing topic in the lyrics, it's interesting, very much so. I finished up on Exsanguinator, which is a bloody horror for about 20,000 words straight. I'm going through editing. I think I'm about like almost halfway done with editing. I wish I could have made more progress, but these weekends have been busy. Journey to the Mountain, which should be a very unbloody, dream come true kind of book. And a different sort of thing, semi-autobiographical fiction with some heavy duty Vaseline on the lens for certain things, reskins and whatnot. But that and poetry, all that stuff, and eventually the Compass City. I mean, it's like a whirlwind. I could write 8 hours a day basically, and I would be fine. But creative obsession will have to do as it has. So what can we say? It's a crazy world we live in, but creativity, it really helps the moon turn, helps you get through these interesting times. And I, for one, am very grateful for it. So on Sublimated Poesy, we tend to read a poem. And this one is by E. Cummings. I heard a lot about this cat over the years, but I never gave him a fair shake. Like, maybe I have a volume of his somewhere, but it's been ages since I looked at it. So it's simply not fair. We must all get a little bit more fair and disciplined when it comes to letting poetry into our lives. But I better take the beam out of my own eye before I start commenting about the speck in anyone else's. I got to start getting a regular poetry reading schedule like I used to. Used to read all the time. I always had a poesy book on me back in the day. So this poem by E. Cummings is called Somewhere I Have Never Traveled Gladly Beyond. Somewhere I have never traveled gladly beyond. Any experience, your eyes have their silence. In your most frail gesture are things which enclose me, or which I cannot touch because they are too near. Your slightest look easily will enclose me, though I have closed myself as fingers. You open always, petal by petal, myself as spring opens, touching skillfully mysterious her first rose. Or if your wish be to close me, I and my life will shut very beautifully, suddenly, as when the heart of this flower imagines the snow carefully everywhere descending. Nothing which we are to perceive in this world equals the power of your intense fragility, whose texture compels me with the color of its countries, rendering death and forever with each breathing. I do not know what it is about you that closes and opens. Only something in me understands. The voice of your eyes is deeper than all roses. Nobody, not even the rain, has such small hands. So, I mean, that's just beautiful. All this stuff, you know, your eyes have their silence after traveled gladly beyond. Your most frail gesture are things which enclose me. It's incredible. All this with flowers and hands and springtime, opening, closing. You know, it's a very, very gorgeous thing that's unfolding here. And it's very mysterious and very nebulous. It's a haunting piece, wouldn't you say, David?
Yes, I would.
How do you feel about it?
It's something that I was taught. I believe the first time I was taught this poem was my freshman year at college.
Yeah.
And it tripped me up at first because of the syntax and the grammar. And I didn't know a lot about Cummings' work, and I didn't understand the purpose or the point of what looked like typographical errors. and I was not capable of understanding that he was trying to, with these apparent typographical errors and syntactical errors, and his peculiar grammar, that he was trying to create internal echoes with meaning, and particularly with the intimacy between the poet and the subject. So if you have in the first line, you have traveled gladly. In the in the second stanza, you have touching skillfully, mysteriously, her first rose. And in the next stanza, you have, or if you wish to be close to me, or close me, I and my life will shut very beautifully suddenly. So it's as if the poet is being lulled into a trance when suddenly he trips over some action that has occurred through her skillful touch, which is sort of casting a spell over him. It's very effective. But if you're not used to someone breaking the rules, it's just irritating. So
Yeah.
it requires you to slow down and read the text, and take into consideration that when it comes to meaning, or poetry at least, uh, effect and meaning have more precedence over form. And
Yeah. Yeah.
rule breaking is a liberation, where in other circumstances it would be a detriment to the poem.
Yes, yes, I suppose so. I mean, it's all in your relationship to the rules. Obviously, there has to be certain things in prose, but I mean, there's always been, I think, a little bit more of a free hand with Posey. And how can you argue with the fruits of his observation and orientation? Because I feel like it's purposeful. Like it almost feels like it's streaming out of his thought, and it's all like bunching up together. Because, and I think you said this, you used the word that it's like he's stumbling. But
Right.
it's a beautiful way. Like sometimes you stumble up or down the stairs, and it's like the rebalancing of it it makes it somehow beautiful. Like you almost fell and hurt yourself, but the fact that you course corrected. And I feel like the imagery and what's going on here, I think he rebalances himself. I don't think he lands on his teeth at all, you know?
Yeah. The thing about it is that had he just written this in a, a more traditional manner, it wouldn't have had half of the charm that it has. It creates an intimacy that is very kind of sweet and old fashioned, I think. And
Yes.
doing this, and that intimacy rests entirely on what would be otherwise perceived as grammatical errors and syntactical and typographical errors, which is something he's known for, playing with the word on the page and creating unconventional phrases to sort of suspend an expectation and give it sort of a fresh and vivid approach to what would normally just be a conventional love poem.
Yes, yes. The power of your intense fragility, whose texture compels me with the colors of its countries, rendering death and forever with each breathing. The power of your intense fragility. It's such a wonderful thing because there's contradiction there. I mean, most people would think that fragility is in no way a demonstration of any power, but it clearly is. The beauty, the temporality, how marvelous a frame or a cinematic memory of something. It always takes me back to that one time I was shoveling snow and it was so cold out that my glasses constricted and the lens flew out and landed in the snow. I have this memory of retrieving the lens and how there was this one snowflake, like somehow in the middle of it. And that snowflake I can remember clear as yesterday, but all the blizzard that was around me, that's all melted. That's all melted. But it's like the idea that this guy can throw that down, the power of your intense fragility, it's an incredible observation,
The power of femininity, the strength of the female force. There's the classic image of the woman prying open the jaws of a lion, and she's doing so with her gentility. So because the powerful lion is falling under her spell. So there's something about her gentle touch, which is something that he speaks about in this poem. Not even the rain has such small hands. These are hands that could open the lion's jaw, that pry it open. So he's under the spell of an intense and unexpected beauty that leaves him almost speechless, powerless to understand what it is about her beauty that compels him to do things that normally he wouldn't submit to.
How do you feel about beauty? I feel almost as if it's a weapon.
It's certainly, it's certainly a power. It can be viewed as something that can be used as a weapon to beguile and control the behavior of another person. So it has a kind of it can be used. I guess the example that comes to mind is a female spy that uses her feminine attractiveness to draw in someone and beguile them. So
fair enough.
Yeah. It's also this idea of beauty, though. This is interesting you bring this up. I want to know, is it a possibility that it's bringing forth a truth that he, as the poet, is not able to receive or comprehend because his mind is closed in some way?
I don't know. I think he's comprehending it. I have no idea, other than the wonderful beauty and the tension that's here, expressing it all, making contact with it on the page. I mean, it sounds like it's his thoughts reeling with it, reeling with these moments that he has experiencing it. And it does speak of intimacy, but who knows exactly where he's going. But there's things, the snow everywhere descending. Think about that. My life will shut my life will shut very beautifully suddenly, as when the heart of this flower imagines the snow carefully everywhere descending. So I mean, the contrast of flower and snow, it would suggest frost, as if destruction is coming. But it's a beautiful destruction. It's a beautiful inevitability as the snow falls, because flowers and snow, last time I checked, they don't mix. So I think there is, like, he's holding on to it, because the terminus is so near. And that's how it is with beauty, it has its window, not only to look out, to look through, but it has an opportunity, and it comes and goes. And I think that's the power of your intense fragility. It's looking at the subject, but it's also the subject in time and how it's eventually going to end. I don't know. Maybe I'm flailing and reaching over much, but
No, I mean, that's certainly something to consider. I would interject that perhaps maybe the poet is resisting falling in love, and there's something about her
hmm,
that he cannot resist. So
interesting.
maybe he had been in love previously and he had suffered a lot, and now he doesn't feel that he can bear it, and yet somehow he's under her spell. So he has no choice in the matter. So there is sort of like an intrusion into his space and into his mind. So there's definitely a kind of, I wouldn't call it necessarily an assault, but I would call it um, something, there's a force of truth and beauty that is compelling him to open himself up again to love. And he's unable to resist it.
Now, I think I think the word intrusive is appropriate. Desire is an intrusive thought. You know, if you try to resist it, you have to set it aside, but it persists, you know, to the point of fascination. And I think that this poem has a breeze of fascination passing through it.
If you
Uh,
look at the title,
yeah,
Ricky, that's interesting. Somewhere I have never traveled gladly beyond. We're at the border or of a frontier that
yes,
he's not opening his heart to,
yeah,
and he's being compelled to do otherwise. So that's very telling, the title itself, which is also the first line,
yes. Um,
which is a very old conventional way of titling poems,
it happens that,
is to either have a number or just repeat the first line as the title.
yes, yes.
It's a
Sometimes,
very old-fashioned kind of intimacy, and it's got a real charm to it. It was also used in a Woody Allen film.
oh,
Yes, Hannah and her sisters. Uh, Apparently, Michael Caine falls in love with the sister of his wife, and he starts following her around, besotted, completely in love, and he follows her right up to the point where she suggests they go into this bookstore. It turns out he's planned it all along because he's able to go to a shelf and pull this very thick volume of the complete works of the Cummings out, and he knows the what page the poem is on. So we know that he's planned it all along, and this is part of his seduction. So it has a kind of charm to it in of itself. But if you're interested in seeing Michael King uh, uh, sort of beguile a young woman, almost half his age too, and I highly recommend you see that film.
oh,
Um,
okay. Well, there you go. Uh,
I know it's well, it's probably not as charming as I thought it was now that I put it that way. But
no,
it
no, it's useful information to see it
yeah,
because how rare is it that you see a poem be emphasized in cinema in that particular
well,
way?
it's well, and it was a very skillful way of Woody Allen to create this idea of a man subjecting himself to absolute beauty, which is something that all men are vulnerable to,
I'd
is
say,
the power of female beauty
yeah,
and its delicacy. So
and and it's
it
and
was the poem was used very skillfully. I'm sure a lot of people would say that they don't approve of the age difference between the two lovers, but that's for another podcast, I suppose.
it certainly is. We're not here to judge. We are here, however, to peer a little closer in to the life of the poet. You read a poem, you enjoy its imagery, its mystery, what it is that it gives you, and it is a gift. It's very rewarding to read some poems, and that one certainly had its reward. But there's this thing, and I agree with it. You got to separate the poem and the poet, but sometimes you do want to look at the poet. If someone inspires you to such a degree that you want to discover more about that person, I'd say that inspiration is significant. And many's the time when I've went rummaging, looking through a poet's life. Started with the beats and all that, with Jim Morrison and all that. So basically what we have here is Edward Estlin Cummings, who was also known as E. E. Cummings. He was born October 14th, 1894 in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He was an American poet, a painter, an essayist, author, and playwright. He wrote approximately 2,900 poems, 2 autobiographical novels, 4 plays, and several essays. He's often regarded as one of the most important American poets of the 20th century. Cummings is associated with the modernist free-form poetry. Much of his work has an idiosyncratic syntax and uses lowercase spellings for poetic expression. His parents were a well-known Unitarian couple in the city of his birth. His father was a professor at Harvard, and a minister besides. His mother loved to spend time with her children, playing games with Cummings and his sister. His parents were supportive of his creative gifts, and it's like, wow, imagine that. He wrote poems and he drew as a child, even from childhood, a poet. That comes from encouragement, perhaps also an early fascination with what poetry was. I won't take genius from where it belongs, should it be somewhere to be found. Because it's like the idea of writing poems. I was writing in middle school, I was writing stuff, but it was all, I don't know, it was all gibberish to me. He grew up in the company of family friends. Many of his summers were spent on Silver Lake in Madison, New Hampshire, where his father had built 2 houses along the eastern shore. So they had some bread or whatever. The family ultimately purchased the nearby Joy Farm, where Cummings had his primary summer residence. He expressed transcendental leanings his entire life, moving to an I-thou relationship with God. His journals are replete with references to Le Bon Dieu, prayers for inspiration in his poetry and artwork. So he journalized, and he had a spiritualization that came with his creativity, and I can relate. I'm gonna have to dig deeper into this cat. I have a similar vibe. Cummings wanted to be a poet from childhood and wrote poetry daily from age 8 to 22, exploring assorted forms. He graduated from Harvard University with a Bachelor of Arts degree, received Master of Arts degree from the university. In his studies at Harvard, he developed an interest in modern poetry, which ignored conventional grammar and syntax while aiming for a dynamic use of language. Upon graduating, he worked for a book dealer. While his poetic forms and themes share an affinity with the Romantic tradition, Cummings' work universally shows a particular idiosyncrasy of syntax or way of arranging individual words into larger phrases and sentences. Many of his most striking poems do not involve any typographical or punctuation innovations at all, but purely syntactic ones. While some of his poetry is free verse, with no concern for rhyme or meter. Many have recognizable sonnet structures of 14 lines with an intricate rhyme scheme. A number of his poems feature a typographically exuberant style with words, parts of words, or punctuation symbols scattered across the page, often making little sense until read aloud. It's interesting. At which point the meaning and emotion become clear. Cummings was also a painter, understood the importance of presentation, and used typography to paint a picture with some of his poems. And I remember having that sort of vibe in my notebooks when I used to do open mics and when I was deep into spoken word, which was ages ago. There is another spoken word project that I've been fiddling with that is on the horizon, but I don't know when that will happen. But sometimes I would write instructions in the notebook of how a thing was supposed to be read and what tone. And I did employ punctuation and unorthodox means in order to further tune that in, as it were, to calibrate how it would be read. And sometimes I paid heed to it, and sometimes I didn't. It's that kind of thing where you're reading out loud for the purposes of showing the poem to the audience. Not everyone is hip with performance. Not everyone digs it, and you don't gotta. But sometimes you want to really lay a poem on an audience. It can get hammed up and whatever. Sometimes it can fly off the handle or go haywire. But by and large, if your intention is there, and if you practiced it, which again, I used to practice reading just to see how it would sound. That's how seriously or perhaps enchanted I was by the whole subject. Go to internet cafes with open mics or libraries. Sometimes where I was from, they'd have a library where everyone was reading, and it was a chance to present. And it was a poetic assembly with all of its ritual and its cliques and whatever. But that didn't bother me. I wasn't there for that purpose. I was there to make contact with an audience and to express the muse. And I think this guy Cummings is of a similar style. Not everyone with their creativity, not everyone is spiritual, but I happen to lean into that particular brand. So you got two of them here, because it says very purposefully that stuff exists so that when you're reading it out loud, it informs it. So those words bunched together, that's because he wants them to go like rolling down the stairs. He wants them to either soar or perish in a blizzard, so that we can watch all those things. And the way he has it punctuated is the way it must be read to him. So that's like a performance thing. And I could see where that would agitate his academic peers, or a certain mindset. Because it is about that with rules, isn't it, David? It's your relationship to the rules more than the rules themselves that shape your disposition toward them. What do you think about the rules? And do you think that Cummings' controversy is such that it was, in other words, is it righteous or was it folly?
Well, rules can either be an aid to a poet, or they can be a detriment. So
Yeah.
clearly he thought that he could move beyond convention to find something that he wasn't finding in conventional speech.
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned, syntax, conventions of syntax, grammar, and even spelling are only conventions that serve the reader on a consistent basis. The poet his first duty is to explore undiscovered country on the page and in poetics. And then if he's able, put that into some kind of structure that they won't cause the reader to stop reading the poem. So there's a compromise that goes on. There's a sort of a balance between the demands of the reader and of the poet. Clearly, he was more interested in the undiscovered country than he was what the reader thought.
The concept too of the way it's structured on the page and the notion of page presentation, you bring up an interesting point, because he has it so that it could be read out loud, and so that the way that it's arranged is an instruction for how to read it out loud. But you're right. A person reading it would look at it and almost be like, what is it, broken? Like, did the editor not pay attention? Like, is this a mistake?
Yeah, no, that's typically the first response from someone who's reading Cummings, is that they had a bad edition of the work.
Yeah,
so it really asks and demands a lot of the reader, which I kind of like, but I can see why a standard reader would be put off by this, and I can sympathize with them as well. Really, it comes down to what's most important to the poet. Is his fascination with language, his romance, or is his romance with the subject or with the reader? It's up for the poet to decide that.
It reminds me of the wearing of many notebooks, carrying them around through malls, through parks, through phases of life, to strange places, recording what I saw, observing, sketching, as I was told to do by those who were sagely and wise. And it's just the wearing of those things, looking into notebooks with the imperfection of the raw work. You know, this reminds me of that, like as if he was trying to publish the raw work. Not necessarily the first thought, but the way that it is on a notebook page, the chaos that's there.
I would say he's trying to publish the unexpected work.
Could be.
He's looking for that thing that no writer or reader would ever expect to see in a poem or on a page.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very dangerous and a risky business that he was in. So his reputation is well earned.
Yeah, the work he did was quite necessary because it shakes us up. First of all, it's a beautiful poem. I challenge anyone to tell me what's wrong with it other than these controversies of grammar and syntax. Now, the very fact that he's doing that, I don't know if he's like, because it's lists a purpose. It's for the performance, but he might also just be wanting to give the fig to the establishment, and just explain to them what time of day it is, and this is my poem, and this is how I'm going to do it, and I don't care. I don't care about your King George or your Prince John. You know, this is my Sherwood Forest. I'm going to do what I want, and I can't help but be a little thrilled by that, because of my non-conformity, anti-conformity, however you want to put it. So I get it. If you can overcome the confusion of what you find on the page and actually read what's there. And it's almost like he's telling you, well, if you don't want to read it, don't read it. If you think you're not going to miss anything, then by all means, go to the next one or the next.
There's actually a painter that does this visually to a certain extent, and that's Jackson Pollock. He took tremendous risks with abstract expressionism and his strip paintings. And you will often hear a person who first sees his canvas as saying it looks like something a child would make. But no child could have made those paintings. I mean, someone might assume that his syntax and his grammar are careless and he's just trying to be different. But that would be a very misinformed perception of the work.
Yeah, it's a reduction or a de-emphasis of again, when it's a beautiful poem. So how, if he's, in other words, if he's being, he must be righteous. He can't be foolish. People would look at it as folly, but then read it and see what it does. If it doesn't grab you by the back of the neck and show you something new, then I don't know what we're talking about. It's gorgeous, you know.
Yeah.
Enough where I got to see if I got a volume of his. I'm looking at my shelves over there. If I got a volume of his, then I gotta read more of it. I can't help but be inspired, you know.
He's the kind of poet that drives formalists to the hospital in rather a state of insanity. This is foaming at the mouth because they really can't tolerate anything that doesn't follow a sort of very strict, rigorous structure. And he does just the opposite. And it's not just to irritate a formalist, but he really sincerely is trying to liberate his imagination and poetry to take it in a different direction. And when you consider when he was writing this poetry, verse was still firmly in the mainstream and published as what poetry should or ought to be. So this was a direct challenge to the establishment of formalist poetry. So it's quite a ballsy thing to do. I mean,
Yes,
and I'm not at all surprised that, considering he was the son of a professor, that I would like to know what his father thought of it.
that would be interesting. I think the formalists who were irked, if they heard it read aloud without looking at the page, they might. I mean, who knows? Maybe their formalism is so all-consuming that they wouldn't be able to get into it. But I think if he read it out loud, it would be like a slap in the face, and I mean that in the good way. And wake up, wake up. This is what it can be. Wake up.
Now, I don't think they could get past the syntax. The unusual syntax would irritate them greatly.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. But if it's meant for, I agree with you. What I'm saying now is not in contradiction. I agree with you, but in the sense of the performing end, his reasons are there, and they would either have to grin and bear it, or, like I said, move on. The challenging nature of it is, I suppose, divisive. But I must say that for me, I don't really have a problem with it because it's poetry, you know? So I'll put it to you this way. When it comes to reading out of a notebook, someone who you met and they're a poet and you both happen to read each other's poems in a park and they have a worn notebook like you do, if the poem's beautiful, if it fascinates you, if it subjugates your attention so that you're literally pondering it, better still if it should change your mood, alter your consciousness in some subtle way. Life-changing words in placement, which usually leads to inspiration. If it inspires you, then I say the hell with all the rest. If it's beautiful, it's beautiful. That's kind of like where I'm at. I don't know if I'm being fresh. Maybe you could help me with that. Where are your sympathies anyway? Does he agitate you more than he entertains you, or?
No, he almost I would say he's an inspiration. He's just pure inspiration.
Yes.
And he keeps me on my toes.
Yeah.
I definitely he's a very high standard of language play. That's how I would define his work.
Unorthodox, and isn't it nice to be unorthodox from time to time? Where are all of his peers and his critics? Where's their verse? Where's their stuff? Some of them.
That's a really good point, Ricky. Where
Yeah.
the poetry that was considered superior, that was published along with his in that period, where is it today?
I have a phrase that I've always wielded like a battle axe. And the phrase is like this. When people have a lot of yip and yap about something, great, wonderful. Never, ever, ever be personal to me. But I ask, okay, you said all those wonderful things. Now where's yours? If you write one, if you wrote one and I'm like, man, I can't deny it, then I'll take that criticism a little bit more. But sometimes critics are just critics. Sometimes they just want to be critical. And critical, if the critique is not inspirational, then it only goes so far for me. Because a lot of times critiques are just pointing out stuff that's obvious. And it's like, obviousness is not what we're looking for. Like, I saw that. What I want is, give me the reason behind why they feel this way. And it'll always be trumped for me by the beauty of what's there, the mystery of what's there, how I have to ponder and look after it and think about it, and how it makes me want to read another one by E.E. Cummings. It makes me want to go get, if I have that book, get it off my shelf and thumb through it for a minute. That's another thing that's underestimated is, yeah, it's weird on the page, but I want more.
Well, he has a kind of street artist aesthetic and perspective of art.
Yeah,
I mean, it's very anti-establishment.
clearly.
So that's just awesome for him, you know. I mean, I think about artists like Jean-Michel Basquiat, for example, who started as a street artist and then was taken in as a serious painter. He did something interesting where he took words, he painted them, and then he crossed them out to emphasize the words. Because if he had just left the words on the painting, they wouldn't have been as interesting. And by the fact that he's crossed something out, he forces the viewer to look more closely at the words. So he's destroyed the sensibility of the words to actually restore their vitality and their power. And that's exactly what Cummings did, only like decades before Basquiat did it.
So it's a simulation of era. And from that, we get something new, something warped, a deviation. And in that, there's an expression. And that expression is more than the sum of its parts and deeper than if it were never attempted. So it's interesting because poetry would allow you to explore this, but prose would not. Not like you could arrange certain thing with ellipses and even an exclamation point in prose is like, it wants you to read it a certain way. But poetry allows for what he did there with this experiment. Would you say this is an experimental poem, or that his style, his voice is an experimental voice?
Well, yeah, he's known as an experimental poet. So yes, that's a defining feature of his work.
So experimental writing, I enjoy it. Every couple books I write, I try to put some experimental feature into what's going on there, because I feel like that's going to lead you somewhere new. Even if it ends up being a mistake, it will be a beautiful disaster. And perhaps salvage, perhaps you make it like this is well, this is what happens when you go too far over the edge.
Well, he had to do that because conformity can lead to complacency.
Dangerous.
He could have written that poem in a very standard way, with just in simple couplets that would have been very straightforward, but it wouldn't have had any of the same. It would have been just too confusing if he had not let's say he kept the syntax, but he didn't use the other tricks that he employs. It would have been sort of as if he was halfway there. And it would have been better at that point if he had just written the poem in a very conventional way, as in a very conventional love poem about a man writing about a beautiful woman. So it's good that
Yeah,
he takes it over the top.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. And anytime there's a place for nonconformity in poetry, for experiment in poetry, that you should swing for the bleachers.
Yeah,
For
this is an act
that.
of rebellion.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I couldn't agree more. So, I mean, when you're writing, folks, when you're writing your poetry, when you're writing your creative obsession, work in some counter orthodoxy, some experimentation. Experimental writing is a lot of fun. Maybe you're just getting started and you're trying to work things out. Fair enough. But if you stick to this, you'll know if you're a creative obsessor because you'll have no choice. And sticking to it, eventually you're going to get to the point of where you want more, different dimensions of creativity, different arts, reaching into different directions. And I mean, take inspiration from this, as I have, because inspiration is the highest coin in the realm. It's how everything happens. Um, the more inspiration you have, the more you have to write. The more you have to write, the more inspiration you will get. And just from reading and exploring others, there's so much waiting there for you. So definitely give E. Cummings a few more reads. I know I will. And reach into experimental writing. I may have to do that some more with my poetry. I'm gonna feel that out because it's too great an opportunity not to. There's bound to be some lesson in there that will splash up, glistering and shimmering, and who knows what lessons will be available from it. So that was a great poem, a great poet. And as usual, time flies when you're having fun, and especially when you're being creative. Creativity is liberty. It can easily set you free from the situation that you're in. You live in a small place, you live in a crazy place. If there's oppression, if it's not going the way you thought it would, keep writing. Keep writing, keep struggling at it. The rewards are great down the road. But every single poem, every single chapter you throw down, every little thing that you do is satisfying in its own way. There's goals and there's dreams. You know what I mean? Follow both, but you need both. One fuels the other. So this has been JWC Livestream Sublimated Poesy with David and Ricky. We read E. Cummings today. We hope you enjoyed that. The analysis was very stirring to me. I feel like I learned things from it. So I certainly hope you, the audience, were able to partake. That's what we're trying to do here at JWC, is to help you. We can't help you become a better or greater writer. You have to do that yourself through effort and through obsession, in my case. But we are trying to make you a different writer. Being different in writing is sometimes the right medicine. It's all on what you take from it. Head over to joeswritersclub.com. Check out our author bios and our blogs. Sign up at joeswriters.club for our forums. Head to social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, JWC, that's Joe's Writers Club. And most importantly, head to our YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe and share with your friends, those who you know who are creative, who you think would benefit from the content. that would be wonderful. We would appreciate it. And thank you very much for listening today. We hope you take something away from it. I want to thank David for his insight and his co-hosting. And stay creative, folks. Take time out of your day. It's not going to hurt you. Half hour, 15 minutes, a half hour. I know life's busy. But even if you could take an hour to do some writing, fill a notebook, go sketch something at the park. There's beauty everywhere. There's ugliness everywhere. Things are just unfolding like something out of a dream. All you got to do is stop and smell the roses and write what the roses smell like down. 10 minutes, something. You'd be amazed how enriching it is and how beneficial it is. What's it going to do? It's not going to hurt you. It's going to bring a little bit of difference into your life. And I think all of our lives could use a little bit of variety from the norm. Thanks a lot for listening. Take care.